Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, after our general soreness and general sickness last week, we're back for another podcast. We're going to try and keep this as short as possible. So we're just going to get stuck straight into our slides. So first slide today, Tom Stewart versus Jake Lloyd. So obviously both of these guys, I believe, are top six or they're very close to it. So obviously both of these ones are reliable. If you're picking Thomas, who are you picking out of these two and why?
Definitely Stewart has a nicer buy with regard. Well, it depends how you look at it because Lloyd has a buy this weekend and he's free up after that. But I think Stewart for the longevity of it all. Lloyd's obviously scored very well against the Blues and has been doing decently since the start of the season in comparison to last year. But I think Stewart has the runs on the board. Whilst he's got the round 12 bye, which means you only get a week out of him before his bye, he's definitely going to be helpful for the remainder of the season, but also for those other two buys, which are quite tricky to traverse. And yeah, he's capable of scoring those 140s. That's all you need from him because you know that otherwise he's going to score pretty consistently.
Yeah, well, I have Stewart, so I'm in the Stewart camp. Are you the same, Jonas, Tom Stewart?
Yeah, although I don't mind Lloyd, but you can't be trading in primos, especially who have their bye this week. So one to perhaps look at next week, but I reckon, Stewart's scoring is more consistent and he's got the bigger ceiling, so I'd be looking there.
Yep, I would agree with that. Moving on, so Sam Walsh and Matt Rouse. So Sam Walsh obviously started 600k plus, and he just missed out on forward eligibility. I think he missed out by about 3%, which I think a lot of people bought him in hoping he would get it. And Matt Rouse has been on an absolute tear the last few weeks. Who are you picking, Jonas, out of these two?
I'm probably going to go with Walsh just for his consistency. He's been moved now more into the midfield, and I think that means he's just going to have a safe sort of 105 to 115 score each week, and he seems to always have 30 sort of touches. So I like that sort of consistency, and whilst he doesn't have the full DPP, he's still very capable of being a top 8 mid. But you got to make sure that he suits your buyers. So if it comes down to it, and you're fielding say less than 16 in the round 15 buy, I'd be then going for Rao because you get that additional score. But over the long haul, I think Walsh will out average Rao. But yeah, that buy is something worth looking at.
What are you doing, Thomas, with this one?
Probably would say the Rao route over Walsh. I know Jonas is a Walsh owner, so he's probably a little bit slightly biased, but haven't been too pleased with what I've seen from Walsh. I know that everyone was jumping on him potentially because of the forward eligibility, but he hasn't really hit above 120 in the last couple of weeks. I think there's just a few better options out there. I know the Blues are in a bit of in the mud a little bit, but yeah, Rao's been really impressive. Obviously, you're going to get a bit more deviation in score with regards to Rao. But the fact he's getting less disposals, similar tackles, and as you see on the stat line there, and scoring a lot stronger, he's capable of those 160s and can go huge. And he's super helpful for your buy if you can go that way. Obviously, it really depends on what you're looking for. But if you're looking for a midfielder, I would probably take the risk on Rao. I think he's back to his best. I think he said in a press conference or a conference with after the game last week, and he said he's feeling really confident with his playing and all that. So he's got that weird routine that he eats the grass and whatnot. Maybe that's making him have superpowers, but who knows? But yeah, so Rao is a bit of a difference moving forward. Is really buy friendly, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm in the Rao camp too. I just like the fact that he's already got the inside game, which is normally where you get most of the scoring. He's now just got to develop an outside game. And if he can develop an outside game, there's no reason why he can't be a really highly priced and highly rated midfielder. So I'm in the Rao camp here. Moving on here. So Briggs and Wits, obviously with the news that Sean Darcy's going to be out for, I think, quite multiple weeks. I know which option I would be picking out of these two, but Thomas, who are you picking out of these two? This should be a very quick one, I would suspect.
No, yeah, I don't know. I've got this predicament at the moment. I don't know. I'm pretty sure you do, Nathan, as well.
I do as well.
Yeah. So, look, I know you're going to say Wits. I'll probably bring the argument in for Briggs. Obviously, he's come in for Flynn. Flynn, compared to Briggs, looks nowhere near it. With the way Briggs has been playing his number one ruck, he's a lot more mobile around the ground and doing what Rowan Marshall does, kind of dominating along the ground, around the ground, and still getting the hit outs as necessary. He's been quite strong. Obviously, for buy structure, I think Wits is the obvious answer with regards to consistency wise. Having said that, I know he's been pretty popular on Twitter, but if you can get benefit from downgrading Darcy to Briggs, because you have to upgrade essentially to get to Wits, Briggs might be a quick fix in the meantime. But having said that, you probably need to find money elsewhere to facilitate a trade from Briggs. But it'll be interesting to see what Jonas says, considering he's an English owner, so doesn't have to worry about this. But yeah, I would say this is the obvious call, but Briggs if you want to get a quick fixing cash.
Yeah, I think it's team dependent. So if you're low on trades and your round 15 buy is looking really bad, I don't think you can go Briggs because you're going to have to trade him out in round 15 and you're essentially then spending another 2 trades to finish your final team, which on low trades is going to be tough because then you're leaving yourself with less injury trades. So in that instance, I'd be going Wits. But if you've got a few trades, I think Briggs is a nice point of difference that owners of, say, a Gawn, a Marshall or an English won't have the luxury of bringing in, and you can sort of enjoy a nice cash rise whilst he covers for you in round 12, 13 and 14, and then you can still flick him in round 15 to, say, a Wits, bank an extra 100 to 150k, get some points on field, and not worry about Wits missing a bye week. So I think that's not a bad option. I don't think his job security is in doubt. So if you got plenty of trades, I'd be going Briggs, and I don't think many people have the luxury of bringing him in because they won't be fielding him for 2 of those 3 bye weeks because they might have a Marshall and an English. So I think, Nathan, it will come down to whether or not you have the trades to be able to then swing him out and enjoy the capital increase in cash, because there aren't too many rookies on the horizon who are going to be making obvious money except for maybe an Eddie Ford. So I think Briggs with the 2 100s in his system will definitely rise in cash.
Yeah. So I'm in this position along with Thomas. I haven't done any trades yet, but the one that I'm leaning towards is actually not on here. Funnily enough, which is actually going to be Tim English, who's only about 40k more expensive. But I think purely out of these two, I think Jonas summed it up quite well. I think if you've got the trades, I think Briggs is probably the better option. I couldn't even tell you how much he is. But Wits is probably a safer option. He's been there before. And you know what you're going to get with him. Caleb Daniel and Jack McRae. Now, I actually had my eyes on Caleb Daniel last week. And in some ways, I'm actually glad that I didn't go down this path because Jack McRae's now got forward eligibility. So, Jonas, who are you picking out of these 2 Bulldogs players?
This one is an easy one when you're looking at whether or not to pick Daniel and McRae. I'm going McRae, but there's so many things that are sort of unappealing of both picks. They've got a terrible bye, and Adam Treloar comes back in, which will affect both their midfield minutes, and you'd assume subsequently they'll get lower time in the midfield. But yeah, if I had to pick one, I'd be going McRae, but I think there are a few other good forward options that you can pick. Like you can go down a budget sort of route and get someone like a Cornelio who might score similar, but he but you're saving yourself a bit of money, or you just wait until after these two have had their buys and see what effect Trelaw has had, and then go that way, or like go with the Zach Butters or something. But I wouldn't be trading in either of these two players because they've got a horrific buy, and a lot of people are going to be struggling with that one.
Thomas, what are you doing out of the two?
Yeah, obviously Daniel's had a good couple of weeks and is a slightly cheaper price, but yeah, probably go easily go McRae. I know he's locked in as a lock in for most top six forwards. I don't see why you wouldn't get him. And I know that we mentioned that in our article. It's been published in the Herald Sun, I believe, tomorrow. So have an eye out on that, where we answer some questions with regards to the upcoming buy period. But yeah, as Jonah said, it makes it quite tricky. Obviously, if he had his buy or already had his buy, great, go for it. He's obviously got a ridiculously low break even, so he's probably going to go over 600k anyway. But yeah, I'd say if you want to get him now, because I think you'd rather get him at a low point before he skyrockets over 600, and then if you see how he goes with Trelaw. He still scores all right without him, with him in the team, but he obviously has had a history of going below 100, and he's gone berserk the last 2 weeks. He's had a slight role change. I think that's probably because of Trelaw being out of the side. But yeah, I guess I would say that worst comes to worst, if you can't squeeze him in this week because of injuries and whatnot, like your Darcy's and having to bring in the guys like Eddie Ford, I think you could probably afford to almost wait until after his buy and just have a full clear picture of how he goes with Trelaw in the side, and then be able to bring him in after the buy as well. I don't think he'd be hugely stung because of it, unless he goes to 660k or something stupid.
Yeah, well, I actually had Jack McRae on my side before I even found out he was Ford eligible this week. So I think that's enough said on who I would be picking out of these two. But as I said, I did have Daniel last week as a bit of a cheaper forward, and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And then I realised that, yeah, there's been a change, and yeah, Jack McRae's now forward. So I think he's fourth now for forward. So I think that's a pretty good thing. Right.
Well, yeah, moving on to our overrated, underrated segment. Yeah, first one, we'll keep it nice and short. With the buys come out, would you guys say, obviously these two, I'm just using an example, Steele has his buy, Darcy has his buy, but he's injured anyway. What are your thoughts on trading out premiums such as these guys? Well, it doesn't have to be these guys, but premiums in general, just to field 18. So essentially sideways trade. We'll go with you, Nathan. What are your thoughts on sideway trading premiums, just to get 18?
Yeah, well, I think you need the 18 players. So I think this is an underrated statement, but I would only consider it on players who you've had from the start. So if you traded in Jack Steele in, say, like round 10, you probably wouldn't ideally want to be just getting rid of him a few weeks later. But I've had Darcy since round 1, and because he's injured, he's probably not going to play throughout the bye period. I think if I can get away with keeping him throughout the buys, I will. But I think there might be 1 week. In fact, I think I've actually got 18 the week the Bulldogs have the bye already. So I just got to factor that in. But yeah, if you need to trade one of a premium to get 18 players, yes, you need to do that.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. Jonas can answer the next one. So trade or avoid, with regards to rookies, obviously they're slim pickings. What are your thoughts on this, Jonas? Obviously trading in guys like Eddie Ford and Wardlaw. Do you think because of the nature of how the rookies have gone in the last couple of weeks, having slim pickings, do you reckon it's necessary to have both? Obviously some went early. But what are your thoughts on trading in these particular rookies? Do you reckon it's an overrated statement to say that both is necessary? Or do you reckon it's simply just get Ford who's had a solid 2 weeks, or even none?
I think get the rookie in who you believe will make the cash, which you'll then use in a few weeks to complete your final team. But if you're bringing in a rookie and then you're not believing that you're going to use their money and trade them back out to bring in your 22nd premium, then it's probably a waste of trade.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I think in this case, depends who you already have. I know a lot of people went early on Ford, or a lot of people went early on Wardlaw. But if you pick the two together, I think Ford's probably the better option, A, for the quick price rise, but also he's 70k cheaper. And is showing consistency in scoring, at least for a 2-week period. His role's not the worst, playing off the back line and wing. So, yeah, it gets a bit of the ball. But we'll move on to the last one.
I think, just to interrupt, I think Wardlaw's actually a great M9 because I don't think he's in any danger of getting dropped from what I've seen over the first 2 weeks. So if you can get Wardlaw in, and then you don't need to worry about your other two bench options, you can just trade in 102k players. But unless Wardlaw gets injured, I don't think he's in any danger of getting dropped. So that's the other option too.
All right, we'll move on to the last one before Nathan goes off on his rant. But this is a specific AFL one, which I guess Nathan can answer, with regards to, obviously, a lot of debate around the tackle, in particular the sling tackle, which I know Rory Laird is gone to the tribunal to try and get overturned. But what are your thoughts on either keeping the rule as it is or changing it entirely due to the circumstances that are happening at the moment, where it seems like players are getting done for a week for simply tackling or over tackling, causing that sling tackle to occur, and it's almost like they're now finally punishing the action, but they're kind of going overboard with it. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the crux of this whole argument comes back to the protecting of the head. So I think the AFL have made it very clear that if a player's pinning the arms, which is what they're looking out for, and then they've got the second motion, so the first tackle motion and then the sling motion afterwards. It's basically where I sit with that. It's basically where the bump argument lies, and that is that if you choose to bump and you get it wrong, then you run the risk of getting yourself suspended. And I feel like this is where we're at now with these tackles, where if you choose to sling someone or you choose to pin the arms, then if you put them into the ground in a manner where they're going to have the potential to get seriously hurt, then I believe that that the AFL are going to have to try and do as much as they can to stamp out these head trauma incidents. I can look at it from a Collingwood perspective and go with Jack Ginnivan. He never seems to get high free kicks. Now, that's because of his past reputation. But if he gets a serious head injury, he will probably have grounds to perhaps look at getting some compensation from the AFL. And the last thing that the AFL want to have to keep doing is paying out these $1 million compensation claims for players who leave the game with head trauma. So right now, I think Chris Scott pretty much summed it up perfectly on AFL 360 for those of you who watched that show, where he said it's just going to be a little bit of an ongoing just rewiring the players' brains, because they're being taught how to tackle one way, which is to pin the arms, put them into the ground. But there's now this added element of duty of care, which the AFL have fought for at the tribunal. And as I think been previously discussed throughout the week, none of these players have got off. And it's simply because that argument of that the player who is doing the tackling has a duty of care to the other players, that once they have them pinned, they're basically defenseless. So I think this is going to be the year where the players sort of readjust. And then I feel like as the summer goes on and we get into next season, I feel like that this is going to be much less of an issue, much like the bumping was, because I don't think we've had many suspensions this year for bumping. So, yeah, that's where I sit on this. So I think the AFL are doing the right thing. And I think we're just in a bit of a transition phase at the minute, where I think the players are just a little bit lost, a little bit confused with what they can and can't do. But I feel like, yeah, if you pin the arms and you slam them into the ground and the head hits the ground, you're in trouble. So that's the risk that you take by choosing to do that. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I think I have to say on that.
Yeah, No, 100% agree. You pretty much nailed it on the head with your response. And I checked my phone while sure. Explaining your case and just let you know, Nathan, that not Luke Parker. What am I talking about? Luke Parker. His suspension hasn't been overturned, but Cherry's has been overturned. So there's already a little bit of inconsistencies there. So
I don't know about the Chera one. I thought
Yeah.
the Chera one was actually the worst one of the lot of them. But I guess that's just.
But
I guess
they might have used Paddy Cripps' lawyer. So
I guess Carlton need all the help they can get. So if they're paying off the AFL to get their players out of trouble, well, so be it. Because I don't think it's going to matter on Friday night.
Yeah, but that's a bit confusing considering that.
Yeah, well, I'll just put out a disclaimer that I did say that before. Thomas just mentioned about the Laird and not the Laird, the Parker and the Chera situation. So, I think the players are just confused with what they can and can't do. But I feel like another pre-season of it, and there won't be as many issues.
No, yeah, I think they'll slightly change how the tackles being done and conducted. But yeah, we'll move on to Nathan's rant. Obviously missed a week, but we'll go from there.
All right, well, now that we've got through that stuff, this is the moment that everyone's been waiting for. I've been keeping this for the last 2 weeks. But my rant is going to be on the Melbourne Football Club. And for Melbourne supporters out there, you're probably frustrated with the way that you're playing. I have tipped Melbourne the last 2 weeks. I thought that they would beat Port Adelaide. I definitely thought they beat Fremantle, but I don't know what's going on there at Melbourne. They're 7-4 for the year. And if you take it the first 10 games of last year, they're only 13-12, which for a side who has premiership aspirations to only be going at 50%, I don't think is good enough for them. I know Oliver's out injured, but he's pretty much their only injury outside of Harrison Petty. So I don't know what they need to do to get themselves back on track. But yeah, they just need a bit of a rejig. I feel like that May and Lever have been perhaps not worked out, but sides are going around them, and I think it's impacting their ability to defend. And I feel like that if sides are sitting on Bailey Fritsch in the forward line, and if he's not firing enough, they're not really scoring. So, to the Melbourne Football Club, I know you're better than what you have been. So it's up to you guys now to get yourselves back into the premiership conversation. Because otherwise Collingwood and Brisbane are just looking like being runaway grand finalists at the minute. There's no one getting close to them outside of Port Adelaide. But I feel like Port Adelaide still might be a couple of personnel off being a true grand final contender. But time will tell on that. So now that I've done my rant, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much for joining and listening to the podcast. Good luck with your round 12 sides and the first weeks of the buys. And we will see you for the next podcast.